Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. We're going to tie a UV Sparkle Soft Hackle. This is a fly I use quite a bit, both in lakes and in rivers. It's an excellent imitation for a Callibaetis mayfly emerger, a pale morning dun emerger. I also use this to imitate the Aquatic Sow Bug out on the Crooked River. I might tie this fly and adapt it slightly for each of these insects, but the overall fly is a very, very good one, and one I use in a lot of situations. I think the key to this pattern is the UV material, sparkle material I add to the thorax of the fly, and you'll see that as we tie this. I think it imitates life. The UV material imitates just an air bubble or air sac on various insects, and it just seems to work. So let's cover the materials for this fly. For the hook, I'm going to use a Daiichi 1260 size 12 to 18. I might use the 14 for a Callibaetis, a 16 for a PMD. I might use all of the above for an Aquatic Sow Bug. So I'll vary size depending on the insect I'm trying to imitate. For the thread, I'm going to use a 70 denier orange thread. And again, I can vary the color slightly to match the individual insect I'm trying to imitate. For the rib, I'm going to use an ultra wire small in brown. I'm also going to use UV resin over the thread and over the wire, and I use Clear Cure Goo Hydro. This is a very thin material that sets up with a UV light. For the thorax, I'm going to choose a barb off a peacock, and I'm going to choose one down the peacock stem a little ways so I get shorter barbules when I tie this in. For the thorax flash, I'm going to use Hairline Ice Dub UV Tan. And lastly, for the hackle, I'm going to use a Whiting Brahma Hen in brown. So let's get started on this fly. I'm going to tie my thread on at the 2/3 point of the hook. I'll wind a few wraps just to secure the thread, and then I'm going to cut off a 4 to 6 inch piece of wire, and I'll tie that in right at the forward part of the abdomen. And I'll wind my thread all the way to the rear of the hook, or just above the barb, maybe a touch beyond the barb of the hook on this fly. From there, I'm going to reverse direction and bring the thread all the way back to the front of the abdomen. And once I've reached there, I'm going to immediately go ahead and rib this fly with my copper wire. And I'll tie that off and clip off the excess. From here, I'm going to go ahead and layer a very light layer of Clear Cure Goo Hydro over the body of the fly. And this will really seal in those thread wraps. It'll give it a little glisten. It will also help sink the fly more effectively, as the body won't need to absorb water on its way down. And once I've finished that, I'll go ahead and zap this with my UV light and go ahead and harden that resin throughout the entire fly. Next, I've cut off a barb off a peacock feather. And you'll note I'm going to tie this in shiny side back and dull side forward. There's a ridge on this feather and we want to work with it to make sure that it ties in tightly. Many folks will use multiple barbs off peacock, and that's great too, but you don't have to. I used a feather, looking at the peacock, I used a feather off the left side of the shiny side, which is the longest barbs on top of that, the longest barbules on top of that barb. And that's how I can get a nice full thorax as I tie in this peacock. So I'm going to drop in a short whip finish just to make sure I don't loosen up the thread and lose my peacock. And I'm going to tie in a dubbing loop, so I'll double the thread over on itself and tie in just a short dubbing loop that I can use to dub the flash material right over the thorax of this fly. So I'm going to select out a skosh of the UV dub, the UV tan dub, and I'll insert that into my dubbing loop and go ahead and spin it to create a nice tight cluster on this fly. It's gonna look rather garbled and muddled, and I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup and trimming as we finish, but nonetheless I think you'll like the look as we finish up this dubbing loop. Now I use my hackle pliers to spin this onto the fly itself, so I'm going to go ahead and attach that to the dubbing loop and then use that to spin onto the fly. I go ahead and cut off the dubbing loop tool. So I've tied it on, and wow, that looks like a garbled mess. But let's do a little cleanup. We'll cut some of these longer ends. We'll clean up the head a little bit before we move into putting a hackle on the fly. The UV material or UV flash material really adds life to this pattern. And I think when you see the finished fly, you really see that. And when it's in the water and fishing, it's really an awesome pattern. So I've prepared a feather, and I'm going to clip the tip of that feather in my hackle pliers and then pull back the barbs to just expose the tip. And I'll clip off a section so I leave just a little nub at the tip. Now I'm going to take and stroke the fibers of the hackle backwards and begin to wrap this. And I'll take 2 wraps using my hackle pliers at the butt of this feather. And it's important to stroke those fibers back to create a folded wing technique that you'll see in the video. So when I first tie this in or roll this around, it looks a little messy, but let's clean up the head a touch, and then I'll tie the thread back over the hackle and push it back into the thorax. I used peacock in this thorax, and that actually helps to push this wing outward and hold it in place so it's a nice big wide flare in this soft hackle. So now I'll drop into a whip finish and clean up that head just a little bit and finish up this fly. So now let me rotate the vise and I'll give you the full profile of this fly as it spins around. So that's been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. Please give the UV Sparkle Soft Hackle a try. I think you'll especially like it out on the Crooked River to imitate the various flies that exist on that river, but also give it a try in some of your favorite lakes as well this summer. And please like our YouTube page and like our Facebook page. Thanks for watching.